Next week, most of us will take a day off from work and celebrate Thanksgiving. We'll probably eat too much, and some of you will watch parades and maybe some football. I'm hoping to have enough ice to go ice fishing this year. I think this year it might actually happen. Some will also actually reflect on the real purpose of the day, being thankful. People who believe in God will thank Him for what He has provided to them. Non-believers can also be thankful for what they have. Both groups have one thing in common. They are free to have those beliefs. The First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America prohibits the government from establishing an official religion or prohibiting the free exercise of religion. That concept goes back to the earliest days of America. Most of us know the story of the Pilgrims, who left Europe to escape religious persecution. Today, let's dig a little deeper into the story and its repercussions. First of all, the Pilgrims were not called Pilgrims in the 1600s. They were called separatists because they wanted to separate from the Church of England. They weren't called Pilgrims until the mid-1800s, but we'll use that name in this speech just to keep it simple. Let's do a little exercise for the moment. Consider your religious belief. If you don't have a belief, consider what you care most passionately about. Think hard on that and how important that is to you. Now, imagine that the government passed a law that made that practice illegal. Not only that, imagine that that law required you to do the opposite of that thing. How would that make you feel? That's the way the Pilgrims felt in the 1600s. It was illegal to not attend the Church of England services, with a fine of about $50 in today's money for every Sunday that you missed. There were bigger fines and more punishments if you actually held unofficial church services. Several groups separated from the Church of England because of the differences in doctrine and governance, and some of the leaders of those groups were executed. The people we know as the Pilgrims were one of these groups. They were called Congregationalists. They believed that each congregation should govern itself without a hierarchy of church officials, and especially without the King of England in charge of the church. The Pilgrims wanted to get far away from England, so they made an agreement with a group of investors to start a colony in North America. They wanted a place where they could worship as they pleased with the opportunity to make a living. Most of us know the rest of the story. The Pilgrims were about half of a group of 102 colonists that bought passage on two ships, the Mayflower and the Speedwell. The Speedwell began to leak early in the voyage, so everybody crowded onto the Mayflower and the Speedwell went home. Including the 6-week journey across the Atlantic Ocean, the colonists lived on that ship from the end of July 1620 to February of 1621, almost 6 months, while they looked for a place to settle and build some shelter. Finally, they moved ashore in midwinter. Almost half of them died. When spring finally came, the colonists planted crops and were able to start hunting and fishing. They traded with the Native Americans for furs that they could ship back to Europe and start to pay off their debt to the investors. It still wasn't easy, but spring and summer allowed them to get more prepared for the coming winter. Which brings us to the so-called first Thanksgiving. Again, it wasn't an official holiday until 1870. However, the Pilgrims celebrated their first harvest with a feast to thank God for providing for them. Remember, at this time, the Pilgrims were living in small cabins with wood fires for cooking and for heat. They had very few furnishings. They didn't have much in the line of comfort. The Pilgrims were simply thankful that they weren't sick and starving. The Pilgrims were also grateful for having their own community and being able to govern themselves. They established the concept of religious freedom and local governance. They risked their lives and property for freedom. 150 years later, the descendants and beneficiaries of the Pilgrims risked their lives and property to create the world's first country based on individual freedom. Next week, as we enjoy our national holiday of Thanksgiving, I encourage all of us to elevate our thinking. Yes, we enjoy the food. We are grateful for our families and our health. Think how fortunate we are to have our work and the material possessions it provides. Think also how we can criticize our government, theoretically without reprisal. Think how we can worship, or not, according to our beliefs. America is not perfect, because no nation or person is perfect. But America is the world standard for freedom. Like the original Pilgrims, people come here for opportunity, not guarantees. Everyone here is protected by the limits placed on the government by the founders of this country, so that everyone can enjoy life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Next Thursday, ponder your thankfulness for those blessings. Give a few thoughts to those pious, praying pilgrims who risked everything to be free to worship as they please and to govern themselves. Give a few thoughts to the founders who fought for freedom. Let us give thanks. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Craig.